Alexander, first of all, can we just put this story into context? What was going on in Yemen before COVID-19?
Good morning, Penny. Yes, that's the right question, actually, because to understand why it's so bad, you do have to go back in time a little bit. If we were having this conversation between 5 to 10 years ago, we would already be concerned. We would be talking about the most water-scarce country in the world, high levels of unemployment, 35%, half the population living on less than $2 a day, a very difficult country to govern generally, very mountainous, over 135,000 villages, only about 30% of the people live in cities. So already we would have been talking about a major humanitarian concern. If we'd have had this conversation 1 year ago, we'd have been talking about a conflict that had lasted 5 years, causing massive displacement, loss of homes and jobs, civil servants, engineers, doctors not being paid for up to 5 years, so health facilities have stopped functioning, water facilities are extremely poor, so there's lack of access to clean drinking water, widespread cholera, lots of people displaced, which makes things worse, and the people have become poorer and therefore less able to afford the little food that is available, and parts of the country were already in or near famine. And that was a year ago. So now you add on top of that the pandemic, and you see a country where people have weakened immune systems, they can't access health facilities, and critical things that helped people survive, such as remittances, has gone down by 80%. So these are some of the conditions that make the Yemen so vulnerable to COVID-19.
Yes, and just for people who just can't remember where Yemen is, it's south of Saudi Arabia, it's east of Eritrea and Sudan, north of Ethiopia, and it's just on the Gulf of Aden. So that's where it's placed. Tell me about COVID then, coming into this population. I think it's a population. Am I right in thinking it's about 25 million?
Yeah, that's 27, I think, at the moment. Yeah, that's right. And we estimate that around 24 million are in need of humanitarian assistance, which gives you some sense of the scale of the need, and not just related to COVID. So to your question, why is the COVID situation so bad and what's it like? Well, I suppose it starts with lack of information, that if you do get sick with symptoms, you probably still don't know quite what it is, and therefore you're behaving normally around your loved ones and the people that you're living with. The people that you're living with, even if the person next to you does have symptoms, may well not have access to clean water. Therefore, they can't do the basic things to protect themselves, such as wash their hands. If then you're feeling more seriously sick and you think you need to go to hospital, there's a high chance you won't be able to get to one. The fuel is very expensive. It's scarce. There may well not be a functioning medical facility anywhere near you. As I mentioned, around half of them are not functioning at all at the moment, and many don't have any doctors left. And even if you do get to one, there's a high probability that there will be no equipment, no medicine, and if there are costs involved, they will be beyond you. So it's the culmination of things that means that if you're vulnerable to the symptoms because your immune systems are down, the likelihood of spreading is high because information is low, and your ability to get treatment is severely compromised by that context, which is why the Red Cross and other actors are prioritizing supporting hospitals, medical facilities, and spreading information to help keep people safe.
Alexander, this might be oversimplifying things, but how has the situation in Yemen been allowed to get this bad?
Well, the answer to that is quite political, I'm afraid. There's a great deal of regional and global interests in the values of the ports and the coastlines and the untapped oil and gas supplies in Yemen, and unfortunately it has made the people of Yemen vulnerable to proxy influence and eventually proxy fighting. So and it's a little off the radar for most of us. So the poor people, they're great people if you go there, really lovely, hospitable people, but I'm afraid they are extremely unfortunate in terms of how they are being used and treated by the world generally.
And is money the answer? What can improve things?
Well, money is not the answer. Money can improve things in the sense that there are immediate threats to life in Yemen because of food insecurity, near famine, and the necessity for clean water and for functioning medical facilities. Now, delivering those things in Yemen is actually very difficult. The ports are not functioning very well. The country is divided, and therefore access across the country is somewhat limited. That's why we work, for example, with the Yemeni Red Crescent, which does cover the entire country, which is a huge advantage. But mobility is extremely compromised, and the infrastructure of the country, bridges and roads, have been damaged. So under the best of circumstances, even if there were no COVID-19, it's a difficult aid environment. The money going into Yemen is reducing. When I was there last year, there were around 10 million people each month being supported by food deliveries. That's gone down now. I mean, that's a huge operation. It's ginormous. But the numbers have gone down because the income into the aid sector generally for Yemen has gone down, which is a major problem. So you can save lives through aid, through medical care, through water, through food. That's what we try to do in the Red Cross with the support of the British Red Cross. But in reality, of course, you need a political solution for a context like Yemen.
Yeah, and that was what I was wondering about, Alexander. I mean, you've worked in the humanitarian sector for 20 years. You've not only worked in the Middle East, you've worked in South Asia, former Soviet Union and Africa. When you've seen something like this, a kind of, if you like, a perfect storm in a bad way, when you compare it to others, can you see a solution? Can you see a solution, or is it just one of those things where you're in the maelstrom, you're in the middle of this storm, and at the moment difficult to see a way out?
Well, I'm afraid it is very difficult to see a way out. It is, you are right that in the Red Cross I have seen many different types of crises, and British Red Cross works in disaster response all around the world. And if you land in the airport in Sana'a, this isn't the sort of crisis that is immediately striking in the way if you land in an area that's just been hit by an earthquake or a giant flood, or has been flattened by conflict. You know, you can be sort of deluded to think it's almost normal for a moment when you land, although there's no other planes in the airport, it's very quiet, and you go out onto the streets, there are cars moving around, there's a fuel shortage, so lots of sort of queues for petrol. So most of the shops are shut, but some are functioning. There's a semi-normality to it, but it's the stories when you start speaking to people. You know, parents who've lost their children in the conflict, parents who can no longer afford to feed their children. I met a woman whose hair had fallen out because of just fear of going outside. Parents who have to watch their children but not eating enough food or not having the right medicine. Brothers and sisters and parents and children who never see each other again because one is forced to migrate, or perhaps within the country or to another part of the world. I mean, these are traumatic personal tragedies, but most of which are going on behind the scenes, and they are not in control of the solution, which, as I said, is political and involves a number of stakeholders. And we can only urge those stakeholders to get around the table and find a durable, peaceful solution.
You said money alone can't solve this, but what can we do here in the UK to help? Well,
we can help the immediate threats to life if aid is delivered in a timely manner and to a size that is appropriate to the context, which unfortunately is enormous in terms of need. So if we can get enough food delivered into the country, and we do have access across the country, at least people need not die of starvation or treatable health concerns, and that's why it's a real priority to try and get the essential PPE kits and medical equipment into the hospitals, and to have major humanitarian delivery of food. Those things undoubtedly help, and therefore we would have to advocate them, and that's what we would advocate for as the British Red Cross. That's why we have a Yemen appeal, which is open, and we would encourage anybody to support it. The political solutions is really what we would advocate for as the longer term answer.
Alexander, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. That's Alexander Matthew, who's the Executive Director of the British Red Cross.